Tonight, President Trump attempting to play consoler-in-chief in El Paso and in Dayton, but doesn't get the kind of warm reception we've come to expect for presidents after national tragedies. Then, is Congress actually making progress when it comes to new gun laws? The answer might actually surprise you. Also, our legal panel joins us. We'll take a look at everything from hate crimes to the Eric Garner case, which has dragged on for more than 5 years. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Now, President Trump, he's wrapping up his visit to El Paso as we speak, which followed a trip to Dayton, Ohio. Of course, those cities, they were the scenes of tragedies over the weekend when 31 people were murdered during the two separate shooting rampages. The president, he met with survivors, first responders, family members, and other people scarred by the twin tragedies. And as typical of a president visiting cities in mourning. But the welcome that he got, that is far from ordinary. The president, he was met by protesters in both cities, livid many with his inflammatory rhetoric against immigrants, and they wanted the president to know how they felt and feel. Many Democratic lawmakers in both cities declined the president's invitations to join them. Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, she's one of them. Here's what she said.
The language that he uses to describe immigrants and Hispanics dehumanizes us. Anytime you talk about whole groups of people that way, you do it for a reason. When you strip people from their humanity, that's what makes that kind of violence in that Walmart so easy for the killer. We're going to have 22 funerals, Chris. 22 funerals in this community. And the words that have dehumanized us are still hanging over us.
But amazingly, the president says he's actually the unifier in chief who is not playing politics. Here he is on the White House lawn just before he left for Ohio.
They're trying to make political points. I don't think it works because, you know, I would like to stay out of the political fray. No, I don't think my rhetoric has at all. I think my rhetoric is it brings people together.
I'm pretty sure that's not the general consensus, but I want to show you just a small sample of the president's rhetoric, and I'll let you be the judge if you think this is a unifier.
This is an invasion. When you see these caravans starting out with 20,000 people, that's an invasion. I was badly criticized for using the word invasion. It's an invasion. But how do you stop these people? You can't. There's no... That's only in the panhandle you can get away with that statement.
Unifying. Now, the climate in this country and the words coming from this president causing a lot of Latinos to live in fear. Again, take a listen.
It's just scary. I don't feel safe going anywhere right now.
I don't know whether I could go out of the house without some white supremacists coming up and attacking me. That's how I feel.
Everything that's coming out of the White House, all the hate, all the racist remarks by the president is creating this climate.
Now, the man accused of killing 22 people in El Paso, Texas over the weekend, he echoed the president's language in the manifesto that he posted online just before the shootings. Again, the guy drove 600 miles to reach the Walmart in a border town, not a coincidence. And he said his shooting rampage was a direct response to the Hispanic invasion, his words, of Texas. Again, he repeated the president's words verbatim. Now, the president's discourse, it is not just a domestic concern. According to former National Security Advisor Susan Rice, I want you to listen to what she said in an op-ed. I'm going to read a portion of it. It appeared in the Times today. The consequences of Mr. Trump's raw racism are not contained within America's shores. They ricochet around the world as far away as New Zealand, poison the international climate, and they undermine America's ability to secure our global interests. And with this latest surge in gun violence, many people, they're certainly on edge. I want you to look at the scene. People panicking in Times Square when they thought they heard gunshots. In fact, it was only a motorcycle backfiring. In Utah, people in a mall, they ran for cover after a sign fell and made a very loud bang. They also thought it was more gunshots. And there's no reason to wonder why these people are on edge. We've seen mass shootings in schools, in movie theaters, in concerts, in malls, just about everywhere that people gather. Rural, suburban, cities, it makes no difference. Now I'm going to wrap up this portion by remembering some of the victims and also the heroes of these tragedies. A young couple, Jordan and Andre Ochondo, they were killed in El Paso while they tried to shield their infant from gunfire. Police found the baby under the mother, covered with blood, but thankfully the infant okay. That baby is one of 3 kids who are now orphans after this shooting. Javier Rodriguez, he was killed while waiting online at the bank at the El Paso Walmart. He was only 15 years old. Even more children would have been killed if not for people like Glendon Oakley. He's an Army soldier who was shopping at the Walmart in question when the shooting broke out. Private First Class Oakley and another man corralled kids who were running around in mayhem, and they carried them to safety. Police say they saved more than a dozen lives. Here's Oakley.
I want to clarify that what I did was what I was supposed to do. I understand it was heroic, and I'm looked at as a hero for it, but that wasn't the reason for me. I'm just focused on the kids that I could not get and the families that were lost, because it hurts me like I lost, like they were part of me.
And let's not forget to recognize the incredible work done by the Dayton police force. In less than a minute, they brought down the gunman. It's hard to imagine how many lives those brave men and women saved in the process. And joining me now is Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And the optics today, we had competing messages, but yet common grief. I saw the president before he left talking about being a unifier when we've seen in 3 years everything but. I saw presidential hopefuls on the Democratic side on stages in South Carolina at the site of a Baptist church where people were gunned down in a prior administration, and then people remembering, like Vice President Biden did, past presidents at times, and what they attempted to do and the signs they showed, referencing not only his old boss, President Obama, but even George W. Bush going to a mosque after 9/11 to show that we were all Americans. And you put that in contrast to the ramp up to this weekend. And while there is no direct line, even though some have said the president did this, these people shot, the climate certainly is different than anything I remember in my lifetime, and I'm 50 now. I don't remember people not wanting a president around because they thought there could be a through line, that he was the accelerant to a fire that was burning, and he was gladly pouring gas fuel on it. And it's a sad time, not just for the tragedies, but it's a sad time that the places we're used to looking for not just comfort, but answers, you look at them as part of the problem.
First of all, as you were doing the ramp up and going through what we had seen in El Paso and in Dayton and what we're seeing in the days since, I wondered how many times you and I over the last 12 years that we've worked together
Too many.
have had to do these stories. And what's different about this one is that usually we're wondering what's causing this. We focus on the guns, but the disparate rationales behind it. There's a cogent rationale here, and it is following the messaging that's been coming from the White House. And the most stark difference that I've noticed about the reception that the president got today, it's not because of the politics, because they want to one-up him, or because they want to pressure him on gun control. It's not even necessarily that they blame him for the rhetoric that might have led to some of this, though there is certainly some of that. It's because there was no confidence in either of those communities that he wasn't going to come to town and make it worse today. And there's no reasonable expectation that he would or he wouldn't. You honestly don't know. If he starts talking extemporaneously, we saw it after Charlottesville. He says something that makes the situation worse. And I understand why people in Dayton and people in El Paso felt like to a degree, like a David Duke type person was coming to town, somebody who could conceivably inflame things and make it worse. And when you're grieving and looking for answers, that's the last thing you want. That's why the president's getting these reactions in those two towns today.
And for even a little bit more of the color in terms of what surrounded this, there was calculations that people had to make, not just politically, but also morally. If you're an elected official and it's your community that was under assault in that awful weekend, and you lost people, and people have a raw, there's always a raw sadness, but there's a pain, and there's always a tangible anger as to the why or what could have been.
Sure.
And the president comes to town after all the things that he has said, and we chronicle a fraction of the things, as you know, what he has said. Do you meet him? Do you want to be on the same stage with him? And if you do you take the higher ground here, and do you bite your tongue? Apparently, not only did they, apparently a lot of the families did too. And I want to think, in the wake of this, this was the messaging from the White House. The president on the front lawn, not only talking about the falsehoods that he's been a unifier. Everybody, I think even his own family knows he's not that, okay? But more than that, he went into a Twitter fight with Beto O'Rourke, okay? He's the president. He went after Joe Biden today, after the comments that Biden made.
He went after Barack Obama for the statement that
exactly.
he released.
And Barack
even though
Obama didn't even name him.
That's right.
But Andrew, listen, Andrew and I, this is a little inside baseball, but a lot of times cameras aren't permitted to be there at delicate moments. Like when you're visiting people in hospitals, it's unseemly. Makes sense. That was also the gag that was put on today. The president's people put out a statement that the victims treated him like a rock star, was their words. And we're hearing, by the way, competing accounts on that some of them made it clear they didn't appreciate what the president did. But the tackiness and the unseemliness, we have a president.
We're seeing the images now.
Right.
This is released by the White House.
And they had said we didn't want cameras involved. The White House put these pictures out, even though they made sure the media wasn't allowed in to take their own, to have their own account of what was said. He went in the back entrances so they wouldn't see the protesters. And then to say it's about me, I got treated as a rock star. Imagine if it's your loved one, or Andrew's and mine, that was sitting in a hospital bed, and not irrationally you can say, look at the language I've heard for the last 3 years, and look at this deranged person that goes in there. And finally, Andrew, I'll make this last point, and I'll let you jump in. The White House has said, among other things, video games and the rest, that this is about crazy people. It's not the gun that pulls the trigger. Well, even if you take that, if there are crazy people that are unhinged, and you're saying things that they're parroting back, and it's not just what this guy did in El Paso, Texas. We saw in Florida with the Trump stickers on the thing going after the press because they're the enemy of the people, what the president said. You saw, I can go chapter and verse, I'm not even going to do that. But if you believe they're unhinged people and you're going to do nothing about the guns, then at least watch what you say. And there's not a scintilla of contrition. There's not a scintilla of self-examination. There's no remorse. This was check it off the list, and I can tell everyone I'm a rock star because they love me to be there.
A few things to point out. One, this White House has actually loosened restrictions on getting guns to the mentally ill, so more mentally ill Americans.
That's factual, by the way. That's not fake news.
Yeah.
That's true. Those were regulations, as Andrew Essence, that were loosened.
So for all of the talk about mental illness, he still made it easier for people who have mental illness to get access to guns and do horrible things like this. No contrition, no responsibility, even deflecting the possibility that he bears any responsibility for it, because that would make him look bad. He says it's not about politics, but he attacks his political enemies. He says it's not about promoting himself, but he releases the photos of himself in the hospital. Imagine if you were suffering with your family with a loved one in the hospital, and some loose friend of yours came to the hospital to console you for 5 minutes, and then as he was walking out said, "Aren't I amazing for the consolation job I just did? Don't you guys feel better?"
You're welcome for me coming.
Right. Nobody would say that's the case. And that's exactly the turn that the president tried to make today. And you know,
and again,
for all the talk of politicizing a tragedy, it's right there.
And we know there's two presidents. There's teleprompter Trump, okay? He read a statement yesterday, which was fine, was pro forma. But when we get Twitter Trump, forget about even the shots in the Beto O'Rourke. And there will be the Twitter Trump we've seen after every news cycle like this. Just watch what we see then. All right, when we come back, Andrew and I are going to talk about gun laws. More specifically, the president's talking about them. I've heard this before. Some Republicans in Congress, believe it or not, are actually on board with some tangible changes. Could we finally see a tipping point in D.C.? Too early to tell, but there's a glimmer of hope. We'll tell you why after this.